five forces analysis on the gaming industry, and to be specific, the video game console industry, to be clearly differentiated from mobile and PC gaming. The Five Forces model deals with the industry's underlying structure and competition, Porter's page 39. And it has five major facets: the threat of new entry, the threat of substitution, the bargaining power of suppliers, the bargaining power of buyers, and competitive or industrial rivalry. Now, in this market, the industrial rivalry is very fierce. In this space, there is intense industrial rivalry. There are three major competitors: PlayStation with Sony, Microsoft, Xbox, and Nintendo. There are a few dwindling other consoles, but their market share is so minor they're not even worth mentioning. PlayStation comes in at 57% of the market share, bringing in about $20 billion in annual sales. Microsoft comes second at around 26% of the market share. Nintendo third with 16% of the market share. And Steam, which is a indie console mostly for indie gaming platformers, brings in around 1% of the gaming industry. This is sales in millions of the top competitors. Sony and Microsoft, you can see, are very close in the market, but do not be fooled. Nintendo has a fierce loyalty, and their market segment is pretty staunch as well. The threat of new entry, I would say at best, is slim. The network effect here is strong with the established game brands, and many don't care to switch. There are many of the gamers that are strongly identified with one brand or the other. The threats in relation to new entry are, number one, the demand, like we just discussed. Capital requirements. To get into this console business, it's going to take an investment of hundreds of millions, if not billions, to take any reasonable market share away. The switching costs are high, not only for the consumer, who's going to have to spend a lot of money purchasing into your new console when they probably already have one, but it's also expensive for the developers, particularly if your console does not choose the right gaming engine to use, or processors. If they are not compatible with what the developers are already using, it could cost them a lot of money to bring their games to your console. And scale economy here as well is rough. It's going to require the production of hundreds of millions of units worldwide, which is going to cost a lot of money, and have to have resources to actually get this distributed. Also, the equal access to distribution is going to be hard as well. Those three major competitors that we discussed earlier will fight tooth and nail for every inch of space in any marketplace. So it is a lot of competition coming in for a new entry. Also, the market is saturated. They are already inundated. Let's take a look at a basic model of a GameStop store, for example. It is already well divided between PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox, and they aren't willing to give up any of their space. So it's very high entry point to get any sliver of space in GameStop, or for any other major retailer for that matter. The threat of substitution, I would say, is a real and present danger. The threat of substitution is a real one. There is only a very small share of the market that will spend money on multiple consoles, so it's normally one and done. There isn't a whole lot of room for moving back and forth, and that's basically because the console price points are very high, on average around $600 just to get in, and that's not including the peripherals and others, controllers and games, etc. And also, most of these consoles are not cross-compatible. You can't talk within the Nintendo biosphere with the PlayStation biosphere. So normally this is a choice with friends and families, and they all tend to congregate on one platform on the other. Substitutes not only limit profits in normal times, but they also reduce bonanzas and good times. Of quoted from Porter. And strategic releases of the new generations of consoles can totally decimate and wipe out a different console that would have been doing fairly well otherwise. Power of suppliers. In this environment, the suppliers would be third-party developers. These are your companies outside of the console biosphere that develops games for the console. Software developers, such as the Unreal Engine software. Processors, game engines, and graphics cards are crucial suppliers. The suppliers offer differentiated products. There are no substitutions for these developers. So, for instance, if you have Nintendo or Mario, that is strictly with Nintendo. You're not going to get that anywhere else. Or Square Enix is staunch with Final Fantasy. If you didn't get it through that developer, you're not going to have that game on your console, period. So it's very important that you appease these developers. Also, when you're developing a console, if you do not have the right graphics or engine, for instance, the Unreal technology here is what they use to actually design the games. If you do not choose the correct software, it's not going to bring those third-party developers to your console, which means you're not going to have a console, period. These images are brought to you by PlayStationLifestyle.net. Buying power, I would say, is a mild threat. Most gamers buy off of nostalgia and are loyal to one game or console brand. It's very hard to blow them out of their camps. The recommendations, this is not for every company. There are only a few companies that are positioned to even be able to make an attempt or would even have interest in this market, period. Only Atari at this point just recently has expressed interest in re-entering the console business. The reasons why to enter? Well, video games eclipse both music and movies, pulling in around $25 billion annually in the United States alone. That is not to include major gaming economies such as Korea and Japan. My recommendations for a company like Atari, I do believe Atari could possibly bring a console into this marketplace. But they must re-identify with their nostalgic market base, which will be an average consumer of 30 years and above. They must acquire support from major third-party developers and get a sign-on deal with at least 5 AAA games at launch. AAA games would be your major money-making games, Gears of War, Zelda, etc. And they must be very strategic and careful with the launch of a proposed new console to ensure that it will not contend with any release dates of their major competitors, Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft.